Hello everyone. Welcome back. Today, we've got some crucial news you don't want to miss. Let's dive right into the top financial headlines and break down what's happening. As the new week kicks off, let's take a look at the top 5 major financial events that will be shaping global markets in the coming days. 1. U.S. non-farm payroll report, Friday. Without a doubt, the most anticipated event is Friday's U.S. non-farm payroll report. This report, which reveals the number of jobs added outside the agriculture sector, both private and public, will give us a key indication of the health of the U.S. labor market. After the disappointing October report, with job additions falling to just 90,000, well below the expected 200,000, investors are eager to see if November's data will bounce back. Wall Street's consensus is a rise of 202,000 jobs. But here's the catch: if the number exceeds this, it could signal inflationary pressures and further tightening from the Fed, which many investors don't want. If it's lower than expected, markets might breathe a sigh of relief. It's all about managing the balance between strong economic growth and inflationary fears. It's a classic case of Wall Street wanting a strong economy, but only up to a certain point. 2. Fed Chair Jerome Powell, Wednesday. On Wednesday, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell will take the stage at a New York Times forum to offer his insights on monetary policy. The big question everyone's waiting for: will the Fed pause its planned December rate cut? Many traders are pricing in a 25 basis point rate cut for December, but if Powell signals a delay, markets could face some turbulence. With job data coming up on Friday, Powell will be tight-lipped on some matters, but it's a chance for him to drop some hints about future Fed actions. 3. Trump's tariff threats, impact on Mexico, Canada, and China. Trump's tariff threats are continuing to shake up the markets. After threatening a 25% tariff on Mexican and Canadian goods, those countries have engaged in serious talks with Trump. Both Mexico and Canada are working to avoid such drastic measures, with Canada's Prime Minister Trudeau even meeting with Trump at Mar-a-Lago to discuss trade, borders, and the opioid crisis. But what about China? While Trump has threatened to slap an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods, there has been no significant communication between the two sides. China, despite the public statements, has not made any direct moves to negotiate. Perhaps the Chinese government is waiting for Trump to make the first move, or might see limited value in engaging through unconventional channels like Elon Musk. Regardless, the next few days will tell us whether the tariff war intensifies or if a compromise can be reached. For OECD Economic Outlook, Wednesday. The OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, will release its latest economic outlook on Wednesday, which includes its global growth forecast. Last September, the OECD projected global growth of 3.2% for both 2024 and 2025, but given the ongoing trade tensions and market volatility, adjustments may be on the horizon. The OECD's updated report could provide fresh insights into the global economy's future, especially as it accounts for the effects of Trump's tariffs. 5. Oil prices, global impact. Oil prices dropped 3% last week, largely due to 2 factors. Middle East stabilization, with Israel and Hezbollah reaching a ceasefire agreement. Weaker economic data from China and India, which has prompted the OPEC to lower its oil demand forecast for 2024 and 2025. As we head into the new week, eyes will be on whether oil prices rebound. If they don't, it could signal a dampening of global demand growth, particularly in key markets like China and India. Lower oil prices could be a confirmation of a slower global economic pace in 2024. Conclusion: keep an eye on these key developments as they unfold. Whether it's the U.S. labor market, Fed policy, trade tensions, or global economic growth, the coming week is packed with pivotal events that could drive market sentiment. What happens next may have far-reaching consequences for both the U.S. and the global economy. Stay tuned. Next, here's a quick look at some interesting news from Bloomberg about Black Friday sales and what it means for the market this week. Black Friday sales surge, a positive start for the market? As we kick off this new week, one thing on investors' minds will be how the Black Friday sales perform and how it affects the market. If the sales numbers are disappointing, we can expect a negative reaction in the stock market. If they exceed expectations, you can bet the market will respond positively. Bloomberg reported that this year's Black Friday sales grew at a faster pace, signaling that even with picky consumers, people are still willing to spend when they find the right deals. According to MasterCard data, sales on the day after Thanksgiving rose 3.4% compared to last year. While in-store sales grew by just 0.7%, a bit lower than last year's pace, online sales really stole the show with a solid 14.6% increase over last year. So, overall, it looks like this year's Black Friday sales growth of 3.4% is a pretty good number for the US economy, indicating that consumer spending is still strong, especially online. My take, a personal connection to the numbers. I have a personal takeaway from this year's Black Friday too. I've actually bought more this year than usual. I think a lot of us can relate to this feeling. Our personal spending habits often seem to match up with larger economic trends. For example, when you cut back on spending in a particular year, you'll often notice that national data also shows a decline. It's kind of fascinating how ordinary people's spending behavior can reflect macroeconomic trends. In a way, we're all like small samples of the economy just going about our daily purchases. Conclusion, all in all, the Black Friday sales report is a good sign for the market heading into the new week. The strong uptick in online sales, especially, suggests that consumers are still spending, which could point to a positive holiday season for retailers and the broader economy. It's always interesting to see how our personal habits align with broader trends, but for now, it looks like the consumer is still king, and that could keep markets in a good mood. Third key news, the real tax burden of America's wealthiest. Today, I came across an interesting piece from the Wall Street Journal, titled, "What the Top 1% Really Pays the IRS." This topic is something that's been on a lot of people's minds lately, whether the rich are paying their fair share of taxes. It's a major issue in the US, and even globally, especially with growing calls for higher taxes on the wealthy in places like the UK and the US. We've heard a lot of chatter about how the rich don't seem to be paying enough taxes. People like Warren Buffett have famously said that his secretary pays a higher tax rate than he does. This argument about fairness in taxation is a big topic for politicians, especially those on the left. But according to the Wall Street Journal, there's a more nuanced story about who's really carrying the tax burden in the US. So, here's what the numbers from the latest IRS data show. In 2022, the top 1% of earners in the US accounted for a whopping 40.4% of all federal income tax revenue. That's right, just 1% of the population is responsible for nearly half of the total income tax. And if we expand that to the top 10%, they contribute 72% of all federal income taxes. This is where it gets interesting. The journal dives into the debate about tax rates, which is often a big sticking point. Even though billionaires like Buffett argue that their tax rate is lower than average, the numbers don't exactly support the narrative. The top 1% of earners pay an average federal tax rate of 26.1%. Compare that with the second highest income bracket, the 1 to 5% group, where the average tax rate is 18.8%. Those in the 5 to 10% range are paying an average of 14.3%. It drops significantly for the middle class, where the tax rate is only 10.7%, and for the broader working class, it falls to 7.7%. The lower income groups, earning below the median, pay even less, only 3.7% on average. So, when you look at the data, the top earners are definitely paying a larger share of the total tax burden, both in terms of the total amount and the percentage they contribute. What the Wall Street Journal is suggesting is that, despite the outcry about the rich not paying enough, the wealthiest Americans are already paying a disproportionate amount of taxes compared to their share of income. Their argument is that raising taxes on the wealthy could hurt the economy and stifle growth, which has been a common point of debate, especially in conservative circles. Now, is this a perfect system? Probably not. But the data here highlights that those calling for higher taxes on the rich should consider whether they're really paying their fair share or if the issue is more about how to address income inequality in a different way. So, what do you think? Do you agree that the wealthiest should pay even more? Or do you believe that they're already carrying a large enough share of the tax burden? Let me know in the comments. Fourth major news, Syria's ongoing conflict heats up again. This one comes from the Wall Street Journal. The headline is Russian and Syrian regime forces strike rebel-held territory as Assad faces biggest threat in years. The situation in Syria just took another dramatic turn over the weekend, as Russian and Syrian government jets launched airstrikes on rebel-held areas, including a major attack on Aleppo. The offensive comes after the anti-Assad forces took control of much of Aleppo, which was a huge blow to the Assad regime and its allies, Russia and Iran. It's been a serious setback for the regime, and the rebel forces' momentum here marks a significant shift in Syria's long-running power struggle. As you can imagine, this conflict has become a battleground for world powers. The US, Turkey, Israel, and several other countries are all involved in some way. It's been a major international hotspot for years. Now, if you've been following the situation online, especially on platforms like X, you've probably seen a lot of chatter about the rebels making huge gains, some even claiming that Assad's government has collapsed, with talk of a coup and Assad fleeing to Moscow. If you read those updates, you might think the whole Assad regime is finished. But here's the thing, according to this Wall Street Journal report, we're still not there yet. Here are a few key takeaways from the article. Assad still controls Syria. Despite the rebel push, Assad's government is still in power and is pushing back with significant military action. Russia is actively involved. Russia and the Syrian government have launched this counter-offensive to try to regain control of lost territories, which means they're not backing down. Foreign involvement. While the rebels are gaining ground, there's no question that outside powers like the US, Turkey, and Israel are playing a role. However, each of these countries has its own interests at play. For example, Turkey isn't exactly working with the US or Israel here, which makes the situation even more complicated. So, what's really happening in Syria? It's a complex, chaotic situation with tons of moving pieces. And while it's easy to get lost in the headlines that suggest Assad's fall is imminent, the reality is that Syria's civil war is far from over. From a spectator point of view, this whole scenario is like watching a fast-paced, high-stakes drama unfold. But it's not just a spectacle, this is a war that could have massive global implications. So, let's keep a close eye on this, because there's no telling where it could go next. Fifth major news, Trump's controversial nominees spark debate. So, over the weekend, Trump made some big headlines with new appointments to his future administration. But as you might expect, two of his picks have stirred up quite a bit of controversy. First up, Trump nominated Charles Kushner, yes, his daughter Ivanka's father-in-law, to be the US ambassador to France. And this has definitely raised a few eyebrows. Kushner isn't exactly a fan favorite in the US. His criminal history, he was convicted of tax evasion during a real estate development project, has people talking. He was caught by former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who was the state's attorney general at the time. Kushner ended up serving time, but Trump used his presidential powers to pardon him and cut his sentence short. Now, Trump's nominated him for a diplomatic position, which has sparked outrage. While legally there's no law preventing a president from nominating a family member or even a convicted criminal, it's certainly raising some ethical questions. The nomination still has to pass a Senate vote, so that's where the real test will be. Then there's the second nominee making waves, Kash Patel for FBI director. Trump has decided to go with Patel, someone who's been one of the loudest critics of the FBI's investigation into Trump's alleged ties with Russia. The current FBI director, Chris Wray, who's been in office since 2017, has announced he'll step down at the end of this year. But the real controversy lies in Trump's pick of Patel, a former Defense Department official during Trump's first term. The issue? Patel doesn't have the typical law enforcement background, which has led to concerns about his qualifications for leading the FBI. Plus, he's got some pretty extreme views, having publicly stated he wants to root out the deep state and fire some people from within the government. Republican Senator Mike Rounds from South Dakota weighed in, saying that while it's not surprising that Trump is picking loyalists, he still needs to go through the Senate confirmation process. And that's where the real challenge lies. Even some Republicans are hesitant, acknowledging Patel's lack of experience in law enforcement and raising doubts about his potential to lead the FBI effectively. So, what do we make of all this? Trump is obviously sticking to his strategy of appointing people who have his back, no matter the backlash. But these picks, especially Kushner and Patel, are definitely causing a stir. The Senate confirmation process will be key in determining whether these nominees make it to their posts. It's certainly a reminder that Trump's approach to governance hasn't changed much. He's all about loyalty, even if it means facing some tough opposition. The question now is, will these nominations pass the Senate, or will they hit a major roadblock? That's all for today. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more updates. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.